Very good evening to all of you. We, all of us at the Center for Sustainability and Governance Research at IIMA Ahmedabad, we welcome you to this webinar by Mr. Amit Tandon. Today he's going to talk about regulations related to ESG. You know how the regulations are driving the ESG agenda. Before I hand over to Mr. Amit Tandon, it's my pleasure to introduce him. Mr. Amit Tandon is the founder of Institutional Investor Advisory Services India Limited, and he has been its managing director since July 2011. IIAS is a SEBI registered advisory firm dedicated to providing participants in the Indian market with independent opinion, research, and data on corporate governance issues, as well as voting recommendations on shareholder resolutions. Before IIAS, Amit was the managing director and CEO of Fitch Ratings India. Before Fitch, he was with the ICICI Group for several years. Amit is a member of the SEBI Committee to review takeover regulations, SEBI's Alternative Investment Policy Advisory Committee, as well as SEBI's Expert Committee for facilitating ease of doing business and harmonization of the provisions of ICDR and LODR regulations. He has been a member of various other committees, including the Kotak Committee on Corporate Governance, SEBI Advisory Committee on ESG, RBI's Technical Advisory Committee on Money, Foreign Exchange, and Government Securities Markets, a member of one of the working groups convened by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs to review comments received on the Companies Act, and a member of the Disclosure Subgroup on the Ministry of Finance's Task Force on Sustainable Finance. He is also trustee of the Foundation of Audit Quality. He studied economics at St. Stephen's College, Delhi. He also holds an MBA from the Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi, and MPhil degree from the University of Cambridge, UK. Amit, it's a pleasure to host you for this webinar. Thanks a lot, and I hand over the mic to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I've been kind of talking on this subject for a while, but I always enjoy coming and speaking to you and your students. Let me kind of begin by sharing my skills. So as I was saying, I really enjoy speaking to the students and the participants at the institute. So what one of the things which I'd like to say is that E, S, and G don't sit well together. The question is, what does E have to do with S, and what does S have to do with G? And consequently, the only thing which kind of weaves them together is the fact that what you're looking at financial numbers, and you're looking at areas or data beyond financial numbers. So once you stop looking at financial numbers, you're looking at what is the impact the company has on the environment, what is the impact it has, what is the social impact of the impact it has on the communities, and finally, how good are the governance practices. So I guess that's why the three sit well together. Otherwise, there's nothing which will put them together. And as a consequence, it is a fairly complicated subject. And for a while now, my belief has been that it's the regulations which are going to be driving the ESG agenda rather than anything else. So they'll have an overarching impact. And the reason I say it is that, and this is not something which, it's something which I heard from one of the old students from IIMA Ahmedabad, C.B. Bhattacharya, who's now a professor at Pittsburgh, who kind of, I was talking to him about it, and he said that, look, the small companies think that environment and sustainability is something for the large companies to worry about. The large companies think it's for the governments to worry about, and the governments think it is, something for the more developed countries to think about. The developed countries think that, look, we are doing what we are, but it's, India and China who need to worry about it. So there's a lot of passing the buck which goes on, and therefore there are two things. Either each of us individually feel strongly enough about it and do something, or the other is that is the regulations which will give a push from the top on account of which people are going to focus on it. My own belief, having spent time and spoken to companies and spoken to others, is that look, unless regulations drive it, uh, we will not see the kind of outcomes which we want to see. The agenda today is I'm going to kind of take a step back and look a little bit at the evolution of ESG and how it's kind of come to dominate the discussion. Then I'll talk about ESG and what has happened in India. And finally, just given the fact that we've got a diverse set of people, uh, this is a fairly arcane subject. How do you think about it from an investment perspective, and what is it that companies are doing? Just so that we are all clear and on the same page, it's environmental, social, and governance. And as I said in my opening comment, these are non-financial factors, some of which can be quantified, some of which cannot be quantified, some of which are kind of you can look at it across industries, some of it which you cannot. Some of it, like governance, have a little bit of touch and feel to it, and therefore they become very difficult to measure. But nonetheless, there is a attempt to kind of put it all together. The other factor, of course, is that they're not commonly a part of the financial reporting. But what companies do is they make a disclosure as a part of their annual report or in a standalone sustainability report. So if you look at in India, you have BRSR, which is the business responsibility and sustainability reporting. So most companies come up with a financial report and a few months later will come out with the BRSR, though, of course, a handful of them do try and combine the annual accounts with the sustainability or a commentary on what they're doing on sustainability. But nonetheless, it's important to keep this this difference in mind. And finally, what we've seen is I've just kind of touched upon a few of them. You've got numerous institutions like Sustainability Accounting Standard Board, the Global Reporting Initiative, the Task Force for Climate Related Financial Disclosures. You've got the Carbon Disclosure, CDP, Carbon Disclosure Project, and so on and so forth. So there's a slew of frameworks, disclosure standards, definitions of materiality. The SEC in US is doing something. The Europeans have their own standards. SEBI, when it's kind of looking at its regulations, has kind of got its own standards. So there is a surfeit of standards and disclosure norms which we need to navigate. And therefore, it's not really easy for companies. I can understand if they kind of turn around and say, we really don't know where to begin, what to do. In fact, you'd think that because Europe and US and all have been thinking about it for much, much longer than India has, there would be some standardization or some clear way of thinking about it. But even there, it is not so. So if you were to look at just the board composition, some boards have a committee which looks at sustainability and environment and sustainability. Some people have one director which is looking at it. Some people have an external advisor who comes and looks at it. Some people say it's the responsibility of the entire board. The reason I'm bringing it out is not because they kind of we can learn something from them, but just to say that people who've begun on this journey with greater vigor than we have for a number of reasons, which we can get into later, but they still don't have any fixed way of going about it. So therefore, it shows that there are different ways of approaching it and different ways of thinking about it. This is a pretty long slide, and what I'm going to do is if you're going to indulge me for a little bit, I'm going to kind of talk about just this whole evolution of what has happened on the ESG and how has it evolved and so on and so forth. So just hold on, just give me a minute. I kind of managed to block my screen. So, there are different periods when people say this whole thing of ESGs began. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break up my presentation up into two parts. First, talk a little bit about what's happened across the globe because it's had a huge impact on India, and then talk about the evolution in India. So there are different people who kind of say that they're different. How far back can you trace this whole focus on environment and sustainability? But when I've read about it, thought about it, a good starting point is the Stockholm Declaration, which happened way back in 1972. And it was the first global conference of any size to make environment a major issue. And what they said was, at that time, there was, of course, you had the developed world and you had the developing countries, you had the West and you had the Russian bloc. And so there was a lot of politics which was played out in the initial years. But nonetheless, this was the first conference which started a dialogue between the industrialized and developing countries and the link between economic growth, uh, the pollution, whether it's air or water, or whether it's the well being of the people around the world. And therefore, it kind of started this whole thinking that, look, environment is important. And what is again pretty interesting is, from our perspective, is that it kind of linked it to industrialization. So therefore, it was very important to say that, look, what is happening on the environment is a consequence of what has happened in businesses and industries, and therefore the two go hand in hand. The second thing is you had there was some amount of silence. People digested it. There was a debate around it, and there would have been a lot of, or there were a lot of intermittent conferences. But way back in '83, you had the World Commission on Environment and Development, and this again became very important. It's also referred to as the Brundtland Commission, and they published a report called Our Common Future. And this stated that the governments could not address the issue of environmental protection separately from the other crises which were there, whether it is the energy crisis, whether it is development, etc. And therefore, it kind of said that, look, the environment and development, which is why it's called World Commission on Environment and Development, go hand in hand. And I would say that this recognition that these two go hand in hand had a big hand to play in terms of how this debate has shaped up. Uh, again, at the same time, you had the Cold War. When the Cold War was open, you had the Rio Summit in 1992. It's also better known as the Earth Summit, and it kind of, for the first time, spoke a little bit more openly about the role of business in sustainability. And as a consequence of this, again, it was pretty influential because, again, it was the first time they brought in a lot of NGOs to come and talk about it. They also actually brought in a lot of scientific evidence to talk about the impact which the businesses are having on the climate, the impact which carbon emission is having on the depletion of the ozone layer, the depletion of natural resources in the economies. And therefore, today, when you hear about the Paris Agreement or the Kyoto Protocol, this is just something, where you had the goal of 1.5%. We should aim limit the increase to 1.5, though it did give us the flexibility to go up to 2%. This is what was spoken about in the Paris Agreement. I'd just like to say that, you have all these COP 21, 22, 28, etc. So 21 does not refer to the year; it refers to the conference which was there, and therefore, people all tend to confuse the two, but they're different. So just keep in mind that COP 21 happened in 2015, and then when you look at it, you can kind of work back. But then when you kind of look at what has happened with regard to the Kyoto Protocol, which spoke about gas emission and depletion of the ozone layer. That again came from the Rio summit. Then you had this was followed by what I would say is the United Nations Global Compact. This was, they kind of started to, broaden the whole discussion from sustainability to the need to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, the need to achieve universal primary education, the need for gender equality, to reduce child mortality, improve of maternal health, to combat HIV, malaria, and other diseases. So therefore, that kind of became a broader agenda. It also coincided with when the Millennium Development Goals were rolled out, and this was a recognition that, look, these are big, big challenges: reducing poverty, primary education, health for all, and therefore governments cannot do it alone, and therefore you need the private sector to slowly get involved in this. This was followed by the Rio 2012 summit. This was, it basically said that, look, we rolled out the Rio goals in 1992. It's 20 years. Let's see what is the progress which the world has made. And it was also the formal adoption of the Millennial Development Goals. But at the same time, they said, look, those are 8 goals. We need something more than that, something more tangible. And therefore, they said, let's start working on the SDGs, which are the 17 global goals, which I'll come to, which all of us are very familiar with. You've also, I'm sure, heard of this expression that there is no a planet B. And this is around this time that this call came. And the UN, Kofi Annan actually went and in an Amazon conference, he spoke about the fact that there is no plan B because there is no planet B. And this has become a crying call for all people who are green and concerned about the environment. Then, as I mentioned, Rio led to the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is something which all of us would be reasonably familiar with. Let me see if I can pop on to this. We see this pretty often, and this is the Sustainable Development Goals target, whether it is life on land, whether it is life below water, whether it is decent work and economic growth, whether it is reduced inequalities. This is a fairly comprehensive list of what is it that the economies of the world should try and achieve. This again has had a great role to play, and everything now revolves around the millennial goals. Now, all this was going on in the world, but the US was kind of not at the forefront of this. In the US, at least, while the government was committed to it, the businesses weren't so committed to it, and the businesses weren't committed to it because they went by an interpretation of Milton Friedman. And I say it's an interpretation because when he said the business of business is business, and therefore the business of business is profit maximization for the shareholders. There are different people who have different interpretations, including Raghuram Rajan, whose view is that profit maximization comes only after the corporates have met all their other needs, which are including the societal needs, including the environmental concerns. But nonetheless, given what was happening in the US and given the history of some of its evolution, regulatory evolution, like the Revlon rules and so on and so forth, it meant that companies have to worry only about the shareholders and nothing else. So therefore, the US Business Roundtable, which is a very influential group of large businesses, it includes Jamie Dimon, Jeff Bezos, the head of Exxon, and so on and so forth. they kind of said that, look, businesses have to worry about uh, all stakeholders, not just the various shareholders. That is kind of continued, but it's also meant that in US the debate has become uh, pretty polarized. You've got along political lines. So you've got the Democrats who say that businesses have to worry about the stakeholders, the community, uh, do good for all. The Republicans believe the business of business is business. They have to worry about shareholders. So much so that you have regulations in places like, for instance, Texas says that if a company says that they're focused on ESG matrices, they will not give them money to manage. So that's a completely separate debate or a separate discussion, but nonetheless, it's quite interesting to watch what is happening there. Meanwhile, Europe has kind of gone in the other direction and brought in more rules, etc. So they had Europe had the sustainable finance development and disclosure regulations, sustainable finance disclosure regulations. The US had the SEC had its own set of rules. So therefore, as you can see, that there's a whole hodgepodge of rules and regulations which have kind of emerged in different geographies. I won't walk you through this slide. This is a lot of detail. I'll kind of, at the end of it, share some of this uh, with Dr. Nagar, and he can distribute it. Here, what I'm just trying to say is that it's something which I touched upon, that you have different standards, indices, reporting, so you and which are overlaid by the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Global Compact, and our own national guidelines on responsible business conduct. So you have the GRI or the Global Reporting Initiative, the Integrated Reporting Framework. There is Sustainable Accounting Standard Board. There is an attempt to kind of merge the integrated reporting framework with the Sustainability Accounting Standard Board. Then you've got the Carbon Disclosure Project. You've got Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosure, which is kind of trying to put all this together. So all you can see is that there's an alphabet soup out here with different people wanting to do different geographies, doing different things. So if you're a company which is operating in different geographies, you're operating in Europe, you're operating in Asia, you're operating in the US, it can become a nightmare for companies to kind of address all these issues, and therefore the attempt to standardize it, which is taken forward by the Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosures, is a welcome step. And again, which is one reason I say that, look, if there are regulations around it and tight regulations around it, it is going to help everyone. By that, I mean companies in terms of what they need to disclose, investors in terms of what are the disclosures which they can expect, and therefore what are the matrices they should track. So this is a slide which is, look, I mean, I can get into the bits and pieces of it, but all it's saying is that there is an attempt to standardize everything. So CDP rolled into CTSB, which rolled into IFRS, which is now rolling into ISSB. So that's what everyone is trying to kind of do. Similarly, for Value Reporting Foundation, Integrated Reporting, SASB. So hopefully we're going to have one standard at the end of it. But as I say, it's there are two standards which were published in 23, but it's still work in progress. Let's look at what has happened in India at this moment. So in India, just about a decade, just over a decade ago, we kind of started, again, it's maybe it's the 11th five-year plan when we first started looking at it, because the five-year plan spoke about inclusive growth. And it was followed very quickly by the voluntary guidelines on CSR. So while today there is a mandated amount. In 2009, it was just voluntary for companies to push it through. And the two people who've kind of driven this agenda is the Ministry of Corporate Affairs and the Security and Exchange Board, which have kind of got an undue influence on what is it that the corporates are doing. So, actually, the big step was taken in 2011 when you had the when you had the voluntary guidelines, national voluntary guidelines on social and business or the NHS, as they were called. These were rolled out, and these were 9 broad principles to be adopted by companies as a part of the business practices, and these were kind of derived from the UN Global Business Compact. So you had the Global Business Compact, and then you had the NVGs, and the attempt was to marry these two. So this is what you see, the principles which were there in the UN Global Compact have been kind of made into the national guidelines for businesses. So businesses should respect and promote human rights. Businesses should respect and promote the well-being of all employees, including those in their value chain. Businesses should provide goods and services in a manner that is sustainable and safe. So this is kind of how companies proceeded. And then pretty much what happened is that the question was that, look, if these are the principles, then how should companies start reporting on it? And therefore, we formulated what is called the business responsibility and reporting, which was mandated for all listed companies. And the BRR was made mandatory for the top 500 companies. And therefore, we were kind of chugging along with that. But a couple of things happened. You had the Companies Act of 2013, you had the SDGs which got rolled out. And then there was a view that, look, all this is kind of done in 2000 with a mindset of 2009-10. Therefore, is it time to revisit the whole thing? And partly because of the SDGs had become a part of the global lexicon, that it was decided to say that, look, can we revisit it? And therefore, the government decided to revisit the BRR. And there was 2 reasons. They also actually did a study of the 490 companies. And they felt that while companies were reporting a lot, there was issues with regard to accuracy, and there were issues with regard to clarity. And it meant that different companies were using different units of measure. While you said you're going to disclose something like discharge, what are you measuring, and so on and so forth, was not very clear. So the attempt was to kind of look at all these to look at all the principles, look at all the Companies Act, and therefore then revisit the principles and roll it out as what was referred to as the national guidelines on responsible business conduct. So there was some amount of re-christening. The good thing is the government decided we have 9 principles, we'll stick to those 9 principles. Then what they did was they kind of mapped the SDGs to these 9 principles so that companies and the stakeholders were clear in terms of what is it that each of these means. So what I've done in this slide is kind of mapped the 2 together. So you've got the SDGs, which were rolled out globally. And you had the national guidelines on responsible business conduct, which was rolled out by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. And then you kind of married the 2 and say, how do these 2 fit in together, and which is the SDG which maps to the national guidelines. So here you can see how the 2 of these fit together. Sorry, this thing keeps running. I've been trying to silence my phone, but for some reason it just doesn't silence itself. Okay. So SEBI actually also reviewed it and adopted these principles. So now you have the Ministry of Corporate Affairs as well as SEBI, which has taken ownership over this whole thing. This is just a comparison from 100 companies to 500 to now 1,000 companies. The good thing is the underlying guidelines, whether it is the national voluntary guidelines or the national guidelines on responsible business conduct, are pretty much the same. Primary reporting values were earlier were integrity and ethics. Now it was greater transparency, cross-reporting, and interlinking of reporting standards, better defined parameters, performance matrices, uniformity, and comparability across industries, reporting as a part of the annual report. Now it's a part of some companies have been giving it as a part of the annual report, but also separately. Core principles are, as I said, pretty much the same. But what the ministry and SEBI decided to do was they identified something which are core or leadership, core, and something which are voluntary or what they call the leadership principles. So this is a little bit more about the BRSR, which all of you will now. It's kind of three sections. One is the general disclosures, the second is the process disclosures, and the third is performance disclosures. Performance disclosures are essential and leadership. Some are mandatory. Leadership are voluntary. These are for the top 1,000 companies, and there's a glide path which has been rolled out to say that, look, when do other companies start reporting on it? The other is that, they've also standardized it. So therefore, what are the units of measure? What is it that you're going to disclose? So that there is some comparability. So earlier you had the data, but you had no comparability. Now the attempt is to see that there is a comparability, which is across. I've just kind of done a classification, but really not much more to it. These are just some sample disclosures and what do the various things look like. Now, I'd say that the SEBI actually also did do a review of and set up a couple of committees to look at it. So they kind of broke it up into what are the disclosures which the mutual funds will make, what are the disclosures who have ESG, and I'm going to come to that in a while, but also what is it that companies need to disclose. I won't get into the details at this stage, but I'd just say that there were a couple of things which are very relevant from to us in terms of what SEBI said. The first is SEBI recognized that, look, there are, when you break up ESG, they kind of don't sit well together. But if you break up ESG, E is something which applies to some companies, someone who's manufacturing in the, let's say, power sector, or someone who is in coal mining, metals, resources, even defense. The second is, the whole thrust which India has on the social sector, which is whether it is gender equality, whether it is employee well-being, whether it is what is being done for the aspirational districts, and so on and so forth. And then they said, gee, something which applies to all companies. Now, in the West, there was this whole thing that, look, if you're energy, fuel, carbon, you're bad. But the view here was that, look, we are in a different stage of development. So for us, the focus has to be, you can't say that investors and others are going to shun E, and E is going to become a dirty word. So if you have a coal-powered project, power project, or coal-based power project. You can't say it's banned and therefore, the foreign banks and the private banks will not lend to it, but it means only the banks will lend to it. They said, look, there's nothing like that. In our stage of development, we need to emphasize, all we have to do is ensure that over a period of time, the resources are being used much, much more efficiently. So if you've got a certain level of, let's say, emission, it's on a per unit basis, it's kind of coming down over a 3 to 5 year, a 10-year period. It was a very constructive and pragmatic approach to say that, look, the concerns which the US and the Europe have are very difficult or very different from our concerns, and we need to address things differently. Since G applied to everyone, and they said S is an area of focus for us. So CSR is mandatory. Companies are spending on education, livelihood, educating the girl child, midday meals, skilling people, so on and so forth. So they said, look, it's a completely different way of thinking about it. That was one thing which they said. And therefore, if I were to kind of say, how do we think about ESG, we say that, look, you are using the same term ESG as is used globally, but the S is bold and underlined. So S is much, much more important for companies here than it would be in other parts of the world. Everyone will do what is right on E, everyone has to do what is right on G. So S is something we can differentiate. The other thing which they said, following from the fact that, look, our economy is different stage of growth, etc., was to say that, look, if we have an Indian standard, you cannot ignore it and say that, look, companies are not complying with global standards. If we've defined an Indian standard, we've taken a view that this is what is good for Indian companies, and therefore it needs to be accepted. What it meant was, and it was directed towards a lot of the global ESG rating providers who said that, look, this is what is required in the US, this is what is required in Europe. Indian companies are not in compliance, and therefore they're going to score extremely low on the ESG parameters. So the view was that, look, that is not something which is going to be acceptable. So the other area which SEBI kind of was different from other geographies was, so they said that, look, there is a lot of greenwashing which is happening. Greenwashing is companies showing that they are they're more environmentally friendly than they actually are, and therefore you kind of massage the data on your, very crude example is on your balance sheet. You'll show the photo of a tree. You'll say the annual report is printed on a recycled paper, even as your kind of emissions are kind of going up very significantly. And therefore, they said that, look, all this is there. So therefore, when you have the BRSR core parameters, they need to be audited. I'm using the wrong word, audited. They need to be verified by a third party so that there is some credibility. So initially, they'd asked for, it was interpreted to mean that it needs to be done by the auditors, but now SEBI's revisited and said, look, as long as it's verified by a third party, it is something which is going to be acceptable to us. So when we think about ESG in the Indian context, I think this is something which you need to keep in mind. Again, there are changes in terms of, and this is a little bit of detail, and I'm not going to go into it, but so on and so forth. I'm just, in the interest of time, going to skip these. These are just some examples in terms of what banks are doing in terms of rooftop solar panels or use of electric vehicles to transport bank staff, to offices using 100% green renewable energy or replacing conventional lights. Some of it is low-hanging fruit because we are in the early stages, but more important will be in terms of how their lending practices evolve. Are they looking at, if they're supporting a power project, are they looking at, what are they doing to transition to green power, etc. And that is something which we will come to across as we move down. But these are just some of the examples from the sector. This is just so what I'm going to do here is, this is a lot of data to show that, look, when you look at the amount of money which is chasing green, it's pretty large. I just say that the numbers in India are nowhere close to it. If globally the number runs into a couple of, 2 trillion or 3 trillion, in India, it's just over $1 billion. So we've got a long, long way to go. But I just thought I'll kind of talk about this slide in terms of, just the different styles which investors have of thinking about ESG. So the earliest one was the negative or the exclusionary screening. That became the easiest thing. So people said, look, if you're in the fuel sector, I will not invest. If you are doing cigarettes, I will not invest in you. If you're doing, defense equipment, I'll not invest in you. So this became pretty easy. So if you look at the Norwegian pension fund, that was they've got about 700, $800 billion, and that is the best example of a negative or exclusionary screening investment approach. So they'd say that, look, if it's fossil fuel, we are not going to invest in the company. Now, a lot of that has changed after the Ukrainian war, but this is how the world evolved. So if you went back 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, and asked someone that you do ESG investment, they would say, yes, we do ESG investment. We don't invest in fossil fuel, or they'd say something along those lines. What the current thinking is, it's kind of moved to the ESG integration. ESG integration is nothing but saying that, look, while we look at a lot of the financial parameters, we also look at a lot of, we build in these financial parameters alongside the environmental or social or governance norms, and we will then use it to invest. So, for example, if your auditor has resigned, we'll kind of, okay, or your auditors resigned, or 2 auditors have resigned in quick succession, we'll kind of keep you in the exclusion list till we have comfort. So that's the approach they had. And therefore, they were saying that what are the parameters which are important to us? We'll kind of put those alongside the financial parameters, put it all together, bundle it together, and decide where we are going to invest. That is now given way to what is called corporate engagement and shareholders. So if your auditors resign, we'll go talk to the auditor, we'll talk to the company. If we believe there's some merit, we will continue to stay invested in you. Otherwise, we will kind of exit. And in between this, you have some themes which is positive, best in class. You would say that, look, I will invest in a company which is only doing green energy, or I will invest in a company which is only kind of employing women, has more than 70% women in the workforce, or it could be certain sustainability themed investing to say that, identify what is critical for you and invest in those sectors, norms-based screening. So you decide which are the screens. So you've got all those things in between. But clearly, when you think about the Japanese pension fund, they are much more in the ESG integration and the corporate engagement and shareholder action. Their view is that, look, if you have a coal-fired power project, if we don't invest, someone else will. So therefore, the best thing is to invest, engage with the company and say, look, this matters to us, and we want you to bring down your emission levels over a period of time, or supplement it by solar energy so that the energy mix which you're generating is changing. So the Norges and the Japanese pension funds both have diametrically, or till recently have had diametrically opposite views, and both of them consider that ESG investing is pretty critical. This is just the Indian numbers. I have it for February 24. I haven't been able to update, but as I said, it's not a very large number, and therefore uh, we are kind of still in the process of fighting our way out here. So, with that, I'm going to pause and I'll be happy to take any questions. And I know Dr. Nagar had given me 45 minutes for the presentation, so I'm kind of pretty much on time.
Yeah, thank you, Amit. So we would encourage audience to ask questions. There are two ways. Either you can use the raise hand option, or you can use the Q&A tab, question and answer tab, to send in your questions.
So I would, my preference is if you just raise your hand and maybe someone, okay, let me then get rid of
I'll moderate that. Yeah.
Yeah, if someone can, direct them to.
So first we'll have question from Rishabh Somani. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Tandon. Thank you for that very informative presentation. I had two questions for you. So my first question was that you mentioned that, when you were going through the Indian banks, that there are some low-hanging fruit that they go after first, and then there's some, tougher ones. So could you give some more examples relating to that?
So let's kind of break it up into two parts. So one, they'd say that, okay, we've got ATMs, we've got a solar panel on the top of each of the ATMs, so therefore some amount of power is going to be through renewables. The other is to say that, you've got microfinance, and that's on the operating side. And you can kind of say that, okay, we've got only two printers on each floor, and or the fact that, we don't have Bisleri bottles, but we keep kind of people can go and even in the conference room there are water dispensers, etc., etc. So those are the easy ones. The other low-hanging fruit is when you kind of look at your portfolio. Now it's very difficult to go to NTPC and say that, look, we want you to get rid of all your coal-fired power projects, and therefore, as long as that is there, we'll not lend to you. But therefore, what do? You kind of say that, okay, is my portfolio, how much of it is balanced out? So you say, okay, we're going to lend to the microfinance. And you say, I'm lending to the microfinance sector, that is going towards my ESG target. And therefore, when you give the mix of what your portfolio is, you kind of highlight what is happening on the microfinance side.
Right. Thank you. That makes sense. My question was more relating to like the other side of the spectrum. Like, what would it take for these companies, or what would it look like, if an Indian bank was truly integrating the ESG values in their business? Like, what changes would they need to be doing at that level?
So look, the changes are pretty much to kind of, it's a lot more, so therefore you have to kind of take into account, broaden the parameters. So therefore, there are a couple of things they can do. One is the fact that when you're kind of looking at companies, you have to kind of look at, what are the, just now, the way it works is the company will say, okay, we've got a contract, we're going to have emissions or whatever. So you have to kind of look at what are those standards, what is it that the others, is it a way to bring it down? And therefore, when you're kind of lending to them, you need to make something into the project cost itself, where you're lending to for those items which will kind of increase uh, or rather reduce the emission levels or in the discharge, make sure that it's a little bit cleaner. Now, what happens for a lot of people is they kind of turn around and say that, look, all this is going to be, there's a cost associated with it. I can kind of continue to, if I've got some carbon emission, I can actually always do more and more and more and ensure that it keeps coming down. But at some, it makes sense only at a particular cost and not at another. So therefore, what are the ways in which you can fund some of these things? Is there a way to bring down the cost? Can you can the banks then negotiate lines with the global multilaterals and say that, okay, we're going to give you money, or say that, look, rather than give you 5-year or 7-year money, we're going to make you money available for 25 years because this is something which is environmentally friendly. But that is the direction in which they need to move as they think about some of these. Can they go ahead and fund more solar projects, wind energy projects? I'm just taking one sector, and therefore kind of look at what are the developments which are taking place, and therefore, in a sense, also guide some of the corporates with regard to what is happening, what is the best in class, what are companies doing. I know they're different people, but if banks can also play a role in this to say that, look, what are the standards, what are other companies doing, what is the best in class, are there some lessons which you can pick up from one company and share with the other? It will kind of help all along.
Right. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. My second question is a little more broader in scope. The Indian landscape has been changing, as you showed, the regulations are picking up more pace. In your opinion, where is that headed in the next 5 to 10 years? Like, what sorts of additions to the regulations do you foresee or do you expect the Indian market to face?
Look, that's a tougher one. So I would say that, look, directionally we know where we have to move. The question is the pace at which we want to move. And the second is the depth to which we want to go. So if you're kind of saying that, look, you're dealing with an auto company and you say that, look, what are the various suppliers? What you have to do is basically to say that, look, who are your suppliers? So just now, you can turn around and say whether you can category A, B, and C. A are those who are more critical and supply a higher amount of components to you. So you have to kind of move down the curve and say that, look, from up between now and let's say 2029, all your class A category suppliers need to comply with the following norms. Then by 35, the category B, and then by 2040, all your suppliers need to comply. The other is, look, in a lot of these things, we're also learning as we go along. So, as I mentioned earlier, 3 years ago, fossil fuel, everyone was saying, it's very bad. Suddenly, after the war, everyone is saying fossil fuel is good. You look at Tesla, everyone said electric cars are good, but then you have to realize there's a cost to it, right? The cost is in terms of the amount of mining you have to do. The cost is because with regard to uh, the battery which you have, how do you, after it's run its course, how do you dispose it of? That has a cost. So therefore, it's not green. So I think a lot of what will happen over the next few years will also be to understand the science behind some of these things. And therefore, that will kind of again coming back to the first, will determine the pace at which some of these issues get addressed. The third is to say that, look, if the whole world is going to go green and if companies here are to go green, then, uh, where are we? How are we investing for it and how are we training people for it? And can we then say that, look, you need solar panels. So can we manufacture solar panels here rather than import it all from China? And if you look at solar panels, what are the components which go into it? The silicon, etc., and where is it? And can we then make it more efficiently in India than somewhere else? So therefore, look at which way the trends are moving, and to say, can we then move some of this manufacturing into India? So that different ways, different things which, as a geography or as an economy, we have to focus on. And look, my view is not just us, but the whole world is kind of missed the bus on climate change, certainly. And therefore, when you kind of look at the extreme weather events, you look at the pollution in Delhi in winter, you look at the fact that sea level in some of the talk to, I was speaking to one of the very large hotel chains, and their estimate is that two of their properties will go underwater by 2040. So therefore, all this means that so things have kind of, the train has left the station, so to speak. So what we have to now do is to ensure that can we kind of, is there a way of reversing some of what has already gone wrong? And if there's not, then how do we prepare for some of these things? Because, people along the coastal areas are going to be more vulnerable. So do you kind of start preparing them from now for changes which will happen in 2050 and 2060? All this seems pretty far away, uh, but it's not actually. It's not for nations, for economies, for communities. 30, 40 years is just an extremely short period of time. So we need to prepare for it, and therefore policies need to be geared up for it. I'm sorry, it's a very unstructured answer, but
No, thank you. That was very insightful. Thank you for sharing your insights.
Okay, so next question, Amit, is by Pankaj Srivastava. What should be the ESG focus areas for financial market infrastructure companies such as stock exchange and clearing corporations, so which are generally in scope 3 and are not in financing business?
so therefore, I mean, the low-hanging fruit, of course, is the fact that they're all huge users of cloud computing, right? So if you're using cloud computing, then you have to say where are the servers lying, and then what is the power which they are kind of getting. Is it green power or is it something else? So that is one aspect. The second is the fact that look, they haven't actually made enough of an effort. In terms of the indices which they've created around this, and the second is as far as disclosures are concerned. It's kind of, if I may say, a pretty uh, they've just said, okay, we are a platform. SEBI and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has decided a format. You kind of put it out. Now, can they not play a bigger role in parsing the data, splicing the data, and say, look, these are best in classes, and make this data available? Every time you say that, they say, okay, buy the data from us and do it. But at the end of the day, if you see it as a national project, then it's their responsibility, or they should have some of the responsibility to say that, okay, we're going to make this data available. We will say that, look, these are the 34 cement companies. This is what this disclosure on parameter A is. This is the best in class. This is the industry median. These are the bottom three companies, and therefore drive change based on the data which people are filing with them in any case. So they do that. They create indices. You've just got one, nifty ESG index, which they kind of revise every 4 months or 5 months. It's not really something. And then they kind of, so those are, creating greater awareness, pushing people towards these products, giving companies more information so that companies are able to look at these parameters. And improve upon what their disclosure levels are so that there is better comparability. Because look, if I'm getting the data, one is for me to say, look, I'll get data on 1,000 companies, extract it, say which is the best, then engage with companies who aren't in the top 3 or 4 deciles. The other is for the exchanges to kind of say that, look, this is the data, and therefore as an investor, you should engage with the company, or as an institutional or as a small shareholder. This is what you should know, and therefore you should push companies to improve things.
Okay. Rutuja, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, Mr. Tandon. Thank you so much for the session. Very informative, and at the same time, we had a chance to deep dive into ESG. My question is, since the outcomes on ESG investments have a long gestation period, which are the suggested methods to nudge the company, whether it's your own company or whether they're a client, towards a long-term investment?
Yeah. No, that's always tricky because, for India itself, the targets are pretty far out. So you're looking at, 2070 or thereabouts. So what you have to do is, companies have net zero. So let's say a company says that, okay, I've got a net zero and my target is going to be net zero by 2035 or 2040. Much better than where the national commitment is, but nonetheless, it's 15 years into the future, and therefore at the end of the day, you can't say that look, whatever happens will happen only in 2040. What are you expecting if you want to achieve your target in 2040? What is it that you expect will happen by 2028? What is it that you'll expect will happen by 2030? What is it that you expect will happen in 2032? And therefore, the best thing to do is to set intermediate targets and monitor it. The second is that, look, once you've got ESG targets, then it's always, something as straightforward as in the ES aspect. One of the focus areas for SEBI was that, look, employability from the aspirational districts, or how many suppliers are there in the aspirational districts. Aspirational districts are nothing but those, which are not from the GDP perspective, they are pretty low down. So therefore, you have to kind of turn around and say that, look, what is it that you've got, soft targets in terms of aspirational districts? What are you planning to do? How much is your sourcing is coming from there? Are you kind of employing people from there? Recently, the government's launched the internship scheme. Where are you getting the recruits from? What are you doing on your CSR? So therefore, the idea is to kind of just see that how many of these are qualitative, how many of these are quantitative, put them out there and see what is it that you can do. And the thing is, we always say that what can be measured gets done. Therefore, look at what are what is it that you want to do, and therefore how do you parametricize it and try and do that. But there can be instances where you cannot do so. Therefore, find out which is, let's say, it's very difficult to say that, look, something needs to be done. Therefore, you have to recognize that not everything can be measured, but there has to be a way of ensuring that the work is done. So, periodic reviews, resetting of the targets, and see if you can achieve the goal a little bit faster than what you have set out for yourself. But it happens if it's kind of baked into the compensation of certainly the CEO and the entire leadership team. The other is, of course, that how do you drive the company towards something like this? Because look, we kind of keep complaining that there's a very high churn of people in industry. Whether it's the banks who say it's about 30-40%, whether it's whether it's IT companies and so on and so forth. And a lot of it comes because the job is fairly mundane. If you give people a purpose, they come into office and say, I've done A or B or C. This is what I've done on the social side. This is what I've done on the green side. That will enthuse people to show up for work every morning and work with some degree of excitement about what is it that they're doing. So how do you do it? You kind of maybe have some town halls, have meetings with staff of the company, say that, look, these are the three things which matter to us as an organization. And if these are the things which matter as senior management, senior leadership, we are behind it. And we want you to kind of also buy into this idea. And if you have suggestions in terms of how do we implement it, what do we do, if you can call out something, it would be good. So the equivalent to this is I think that what the Japanese call Kaizen, right? Where they say that okay, small improvements at every stage. So you identify what your environment and sustainability, and what is it that you want to do on social aspects, what is it that in terms of governance and process improvements, and see how is it that you can improve and make a larger set of people in the company responsible for it. That is what is going to make you get to that goal a little bit closer. A little bit, it'll make you get there uh, measurable and maybe a little bit quicker than what you'd first put out there. But to say that, look, it's only for the 2 people or 3 people, everyone else can do what they want, really doesn't help. So if there's greater awareness, people know what you're wanting to achieve, I'm sure they will raise their hand and say, look, this is the idea I have and this is what I believe we should or can be doing.
So
Thank
Amit, we have a few more questions I'll quickly ask. I think the first, which I was also personally interested in and we discussed, is about this ESG rating providers, right? So the first question which I have in mind is, we had these ratings now over last few years. When corporates are rated on that, does it really have a tangible impact on the ESG performance according to you? And that's the first one. And related to that, one of the attendees, Goldie, asked this question regarding the SEBI regulation regarding ESG rating providers and the exit of key global ERPs from Indian market. Would that affect or limit investments by FIIs interested in ESG investing in Indian equities?
So let me answer the second question and then I'll come to the first. So as I mentioned during my presentation, SEBI kind of said that, look, when you're they also said that when you're looking at it, they said, look, whatever else you do, these are a few parameters which need to be an area of focus on. So, something I said, looking at aspirational districts and so on and so forth. Now, for the global rating providers, it meant that, look, there's a change in methodology, and what you're doing in India is different from what you're doing, let's say, in Malaysia or Poland or any of the other geographies. So they felt that, look, it's a added cost to what they're doing because they, at the end of the day, want to use technology. They want to have the similar methodology so that they're able to compare, let's say, Bharti Airtel in India with Singtel in Singapore with British Telecom in UK or whatever it is across the same set of parameters. So it doesn't mean that they can't do it. All it means is that, look, they're not being offering the service to the Indian providers. Globally, there's nothing which prevents them from sitting out of Singapore or London or Manila to kind of do all these ratings and provide it to their global customers. That is the long and short of while SEBI rolled out its guidelines for ESG rating providers, it's still work in progress because they're kind of still debating and discussing certain aspects. But there are a couple of things to note. One is the fact that they've kind of broken up the model into 2 parts. They said that to prevent conflict of interest, you can either work with the issuers or you can work with the investors. So if you work with, let's say, you can rate either you're servicing, getting your fees from ICICI Bank, or you can work with ICICI Mutual Fund and say that, look, you've got a portfolio of 700 companies, so we are going to give you a rating on 700 companies. You can't do both. So there's a subscriber model and a issuer model. That's one thing to note. Now, therefore, having decided it, there are some of the nuances which they are at this moment discussing, and therefore I expect that the Indian guidelines will come out, in a couple of weeks or a couple of months from now. Now, how much of an impact it has is, at this moment, it's difficult to say whether there are two things which kind of stand out. First is that, look, if I've done an analysis, I just want to know relative. Now, if it's in the public domain, I'm going to scramble a little bit more. If it's not in the public domain, it's something which is internal, and therefore I'm holding a mirror up to myself. How much of an effort I make to improve is entirely self-contained. The second is that, and again, this is a function of, the market has to evolve. And the market is kind of stuck because some of the assumptions with which it started out, like, fossil fuel is bad, defense is bad, etc., don't necessarily apply to India. Our view is that, look, if 70% or 60% of your economy is still reliant on coal, you can't wish it away. Given our neighborhood and given what is happening, you've got Pakistan, and you've got China, and so on and so forth. You can't say that anyone who's doing defense are going to shun. So therefore, and I spoke about the, e-vehicles. Are e-vehicles good, or do you need? Questions are still being answered. And therefore, till people get clarity, or if their thinking evolves on some of these things, and my sense is it will be a parameter. If there is a controversy, that will mean that, people might either engage or say that we are not going to hold the stock for some period of time till we get better clarity. But is it going to be the primary driver in the immediate future? I don't think so. In the medium to long term, I certainly think that as companies kind of integrate ESG into their decision-making process, it will be there. Now, one of the other factors you need to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about all this is that if we look at the BRSR, it's got some 720 parameters. Right, we've got a rating which is based only on core, and we look at about 120 parameters. So therefore, if you've got a rating with 120 parameters, let's say we kind of say, okay, we are at one extreme, someone is at 700, so 200, 300 parameters. The impact of each individual may not be material. It may not be significant. If I've got, 120 parameters, each of them will be less than 1%. Maybe I say that, look, item 25 is very important and it has a weightage of 2%. But in the overall scheme of things, it's not going to change my rating too much. So therefore, I kind of believe that till you get conviction, you decide that, look, these are the 7 things which matter to me. We're going to find that people are going to continue to ask for data, look at it, study it, but it's not going to be the driver in the short term. But hey, this is my personal view on this subject. There are those who kind of invested tens of crores in the business and are convinced that people are going to be scrambling to buy data and ratings, but I have a different view.
Okay. Right. So yes, we have a lot of questions, but I'm really sorry we are short of time now. So I would like to first thank all the attendees who joined this webinar and asked interesting questions. Sorry to others whose questions could not be taken. I would personally like to thank Mr. Amit Tandon for taking out his time and giving this interesting talk. Amit, on behalf of IIM Ahmedabad and the Center for Sustainability and Corporate Governance Research, all of us really thank you for this talk, very insightful talk, and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As I said, I enjoy talking, and more than that, I enjoy the questions. They're always pretty, I always have approached those with a sense of trepidation that, look, right side of people who are attending, and therefore they will ask questions which will be difficult. So I've really enjoyed this talk.